Hello friends and welcome back to Haas of Props. Mando's helmet has been one of the projects on my to-do list for quite some time, so I decided to finally print my pieces and assemble the whole thing. In this video I will show you how I assembled a helmet from multiple 3D printed pieces and how to achieve a super smooth finish so that people won't even realize it's a 3D print. Let's get started. The pieces were printed on my Ender 3 Pro, and I've listed the print settings I typically use in the video description. To begin the smoothing process, even before I attach anything, I take my hand sander with a 180 grit sanding pad and begin to sand down the print surface. It doesn't remove all the print lines, but it does take down quite a bit of the rough texture. While I continue sanding, I would appreciate it if you would click the subscribe button if you haven't already yet done so, and while you're at it, click the notification bell so you can receive updates when new videos drop. Once finished with the 180 grit, you can now switch to a 220 grit. I'm doing this by hand, but you could switch out the pad on the hand sander if you wanted. Then the pieces can be sanded with some 240 grit. Yes, there is a lot of sanding, but when you're finished, you'll never know that this was a 3D print. Now we're getting pretty smooth, but I still want to take it a little further, so I sand them again with some 400 grit. So now we can start to assemble the pieces. First I apply a couple of drops of CA glue. Then I take some E6000, which has a more secure bond when it dries, and squeeze this between the CA drops. Then the pieces can be aligned, and it's best to do this on a flat surface, it just makes it a little easier. Now since we use some CA glue, we can apply a few drops of zip kicker to cure the CA glue. This allows us to continue to build, and the E6000 will continue to cure overnight and give us a much more secure bond. With the earpieces, I applied some CA glue around the perimeter and placed the E6000 in the middle. This is so the zip kicker can reach the CA glue around the groove that the piece sits in, and the top ear greeble was attached the same way. And the grill detail on the back can be attached the same way as well. After the helmet has sat overnight to give the E6000 enough time to cure, you can begin the seam cleanup. I use this glazing and spot putty. In this case, I'm using my finger to smear the putty into all the seams. I'm also wearing a rubber glove because this putty is very toxic. But this putty works really well to fill in the seams. Usually I'll let a job like this sit for at least 2 to 3 hours to make sure the putty is completely dry, and then I'll begin sanding it down with some 220 grit. This process creates a lot of dust, so I will take a damp cloth and wipe down the helmet with a little bit of water before I continue. So I ended up removing a little too much of the putty, so I applied a little more to some spots, let it dry, and then began to smooth the whole thing with a 400 grit. Once smooth, you can wipe down the surface to get rid of all the excess powder, and you can use a 2-in-1 filler and sandable primer. This will help fill in any tiny areas where the print lines might still be showing, and help also even out the seams. Apply 2 to 3 coats and let it cure for a few hours before continuing. Then the surface can be sanded with some 600 grit sandpaper. Then I sprayed one more layer of the 2-in-1 primer, let it dry, and then wet the surface with a little water and proceeded to sand with some 1200 grit. Wet sanding with this fine grit will help us achieve the desired smooth glass-like surface. I found sanding in circular motions helps when you're working on a non-flat surface, and it keeps you from making directional marks. After each sanding, I wipe and clean the surface before I continue with a 2000 grit. You may find that some of the primer has filled in small details. If this is the case, you can use a palette knife or a hobby knife and scrape out any unwanted primer. Once you have everything as smooth as you can get it, the helmet can be painted with a high gloss black spray paint. Using a gloss black like this will really help make our metallic paint pop. If you use a matte paint, it can dull down the final results and you won't end up with as much shine. When the black is dry, you can now spray the helmet with a metallic silver. I'm using this mirror chrome from Spastic with my airbrush. Now I'm using an airbrush to avoid brush marks, but there are also mirror chrome paints that come in aerosol cans. Now all that's left to make is the visor. To do this, I'm using a medical grade face shield I got off of Amazon. This visor is a dark green, which you can't tell from looking at the helmet from the outside, but if you were to wear the helmet, everything will have a slight green hue to it. The template for the visor can be traced onto the protective covering with a Sharpie, and then cut it out with a pair of scissors. Then the protective covering can be removed, and if there's any imprinted text, try and hide this around the inside edge of the helmet. To install it, I heat the shield slightly with a heat gun so that it can be curved to the shape of the helmet, but not too much so that it begins to warp the plastic. To hold the shield in place, I glue in these visor clips with some CA glue. I place one on either side of the eye opening and one on either side of the nasal opening, and then the visor can be slipped into place and secured with a little glue. And there you have it, a 3D printed version of Din Djarin's iconic Mandalorian helmet. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it super helpful. If you would like to make one of these helmets for yourself, there's a link in the below description where you can purchase the already 3D printed pieces, and all you have to do is assemble it. Please, give this video a thumbs up, share it with friends and family, and subscribe to Haas of Props. And remember, if you are building any of my builds or using any of my templates, feel free and tag me at Haas of Props on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, because I would really like to see your fantastic work. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.